This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Quiet on the set. Soon we will all be more informed.
We appreciate learning more of our region's news and public affairs. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. What started out as a sale of Blue Cross insurance has apparently been crossed out, at least for now. Elsewhere, some lawmakers and activists are cross over a decision by Governor Landry to not accept federal funding for a food assistance program. They are seeking a reversal. We'll look at these stories tonight, as well as the growth and potential of kids soccer, and we will discuss the Carnival season, including the police department's reputation for handling big events and problems with parade delays. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Stephanie Riegel, staff writer at Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Greg LaRose, editor of the Louisiana Illuminator. We go over to Stephanie first, because this has been on again, off again, on again, off again, it's off. Seems, at least for now, and we're talking about the sale of Blue Cross of Louisiana to a private firm, a for-profit firm. So what's going on with it?
Well, it is off for the foreseeable future, and maybe for good. Huge $2.5 billion sale of the locally based, nonprofit, 90-year-old Blue Cross of Louisiana to a for-profit, publicly traded company, Elevance Health, one of the largest insurers in the whole country. And as you mentioned, on again, off again, last summer, late last summer, they were moving towards regulatory hearings when they decided to shelve the deal for the time being. It was back on after the election. We were again moving towards regulatory hearings that were set to begin Ash Wednesday, bright and early after Mardi Gras Day. And late Tuesday night, Blue Cross officials notified the Department of Insurance that they were again going to put the deal on pause. But I think this time, unlike last summer, it's really on pause perhaps for months, if not years, and maybe forever. There were so many problems with this deal. Those had come to a head really on February 5th when the legislature had a hearing over this deal. Two Senate committees met and really just grilled Blue Cross officials and Elevance officials and the Department of Insurance over the many, many potential problems, irregularities that have shrouded this whole deal from the beginning, and then issued a blistering report with 12 different findings. Everything from, for instance, what the impact of selling a nonprofit company to a for-profit company will mean to insurance rates and to the reimbursements that doctors and hospitals get. That's like the basic thing. Also, this strange sort of deal that would create a massive foundation with the sale proceeds, some $3 billion, that would be used to serve poverty and health outcome related issues in Louisiana. There were questions about who would be controlling that foundation, about oversight of the foundation, and more recently about political influence over the foundation and some role that Governor Jeff Landry may have in it. So those questions, and then there were more technical questions about the way the voting over who gets to vote over the deal, what types of policyholders had a say, which ones didn't, and how much money policyholders might get over it. And then voting irregularities. They were already accepting proxy ballots by mail and by phone, even though the regulatory hearings had not been held yet. There was some allegations that perhaps there was vote steering in that process. The telemarketing firm that was soliciting proxy ballots over the phone was also able to take the votes of policyholders. And so all these questions came out at this legislative hearing. And after that, you saw over Mardi Gras week, the chips just falling. One elected official after another, powerful hospital association came out against it. And I think faced with all that opposition, they decided to pause.
Well, let me ask you, Why did this start in the first place? I mean, Blue Cross is a major insurer in the state of Louisiana, if not the largest, right?
Yeah. And that's an important question. A strong company, financially strong today, and by far the largest insurer in Louisiana in terms of market share. Their argument is, compared to the other companies that they compete with, United Healthcare, the Elevances of the world, Humana, Cigna, Aetna, that they're a small player, which is very, very true. And that is the nature of the health insurance market is changing. It's harder and harder for them to compete. And so to be viable over the long term, they needed to partner with a bigger company that could better have better tools, digital technology, better keep a lid on costs and premiums, and be able to do so more efficiently.
But does Elevance do that? Do they keep a lid on the premiums? I mean, they have done this with other Blue Cross insurers, right, around the country?
They have done
What kind of track record do we see?
Well, what came out at the legislative hearing was that they have been fined by regulators all over the country for some of the problems that they've had in other markets, for things like denying coverage, for keeping a tighter rein basically on costs. And the way you do that is to not reimburse as much, or to just more closely scrutinize claims, right? Whether it's for pharmacy benefits or for just a doctor's bill. It's not clear that Elevance is any worse than any other large for-profit company that does this. The nature of health insurance today, just like the nature of health care today, is like everything else. It's changing, and you're going to probably have to pay more and get less, at least for the foreseeable future. It's not like health insurance when we were growing up in the 70s or 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
And so Blue Cross is right that when they look down the road, they're going to have to partner with somebody. Did they have to sell to this company now? The argument a lot of people made was no, and I think they had a hard time overcoming that because they're a wealthy company now. They have rich reserves, and they're doing a good job, and so people didn't want to see them go.
So has Elevance just said, okay, never mind, or are they still interested in this?
Elevance is still interested in the deal. It's just a question of whether or not it's salvageable at this point. This is not a huge deal to Elevance. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. This would be easy money for Elevance. I think they would like to own Louisiana because they could operate much more efficiently than Blue Cross could because they have so much scale and because they have so many digital tools. They have their own pharmacy benefits manager company, which helps control pharmacy costs, which is some of the biggest contributors to rising healthcare costs. So I think Elevance would like to make this deal happen, but it's just a question of whether they can. I think Blue Cross has to sort of rebuild some frayed relationships in this state with its policyholders and with the providers, the doctors, hospitals, before trying this again.
Okay, but it's something that perhaps down the line we could largely expect to hear something like this coming up, maybe not Elevance, but something.
I think we will definitely see something from Blue Cross in the future, but whether it's the end of this year or next year or 5 years from now remains to be seen. And I think whatever we see will look a lot different than this plan that for now is.
We've seen a lot of examples of things that were well-known local names. They're sold to somebody else, the name changes, and the consumers get nervous about that. Like when KB was sold to Rite Aid. I mean, who is Rite Aid? Or Hibernia became Capital One, and so people just automatically nervous, right? Even though they kept on saying the name won't change, it'll be Blue Cross.
Yeah, and they kept saying that. But to your point, I mean, K and B was never the same ones it was Rite Aid.
Sure.
It just wasn't. It was Rite Aid. There was still a drugstore there.
Yeah.
And so, Blue Cross Anthem, it would not be Blue Cross. It would not be a local company, but it would be an insurance company.
Right.
But I think there was just like that disconnect. And with the messaging, they kept saying, oh, we'll still be Blue Cross. No, you won't.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
the bottom
just like,
line,
no, you
people
won't.
are concerned about their health care coverage and what they're paying for.
cost. That's
too.
right.
That's the
Yeah.
big
That's
concern.
right.
So,
No one could say it's going to be good for consumers.
yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Steph. Well, thanks a lot, and thanks for all your coverage. I mean, you've kept us informed, so that's we're grateful for that. Greg, over to you. The Landry administration has decided not to accept a food program for the summer, over summer vacation for kids, a supplemental food program, $71 million.
Right. This would have impacted upwards of nearly 500,000 children. And this was a program that the USDA put in place temporarily in the pandemic when it was realized that kids who weren't able to go to school still needed to be provided with meals. And there was such a good uptake on it that fast forward a few years, there was a realization that, hey, we aren't covering the summer months when kids aren't in school, but we have the resources to make this popular and make it happen. Louisiana was one of just over a couple dozen states that said, no, look, we're good. This was actually a decision that Superintendent Cade Brumley, State Education Superintendent Cade Brumley, made in late December with the reasoning that, hey, we've got a new administration coming in. Let's not commit ourselves to something that might have an unforeseen cost for the new governor and the new Secretary of the Department of Children and Family Services. Fast forward until February, when the real hard deadline of February 15th was in place, and the new DSFS Secretary Matlock came out and said that, yeah, we're not going to do this. Furthermore, it's our goal to make families self-sufficient. And that phrase right there really, I think, needled some folks that said, my goodness, we are a poor state with many poor children who are hungry. Why would you pass this up?
Yeah, so this was a program that started, as you said, with the pandemic and kids not in school. It's now permanent. It's money that the feds are offering to states for this. How much actually would each family get?
It was capped at $120 per family, but if you had, a smaller family, it's $40 per child just for the months of June and July. Just extra grocery money as everyone goes to the checkout aisle. Groceries aren't getting any cheaper, although we are told that inflation has eased. This was money to help those families get through those summer months when obviously the kids aren't getting the free breakfast or the free lunch at school.
So this was money that the state would get from the feds, $71 million. But it would cost the state a little bit in terms of administrative costs, is what they've argued.
Right. They're pegging the state's cost at $3.5 million, which when you take as a percentage out of $71 million, arguably that's not a big chunk. But I think there's an overriding philosophical message coming from the Landry administration of that it's not so much about the cost of this. It's about making people self-sufficient. It's about eliminating programs or avoiding programs that have unforeseen strings attached. They never really elaborated on what that was because as far as I've been able to tell, this amounts to USDA basically adding $40 per month to a debit card. The system is in place. I've pressed DCFS for answers like what is this extra cost we're talking about? The role of the education department is to help identify the kids who are accepting the free lunch. And you would think, okay, that infrastructure exists. It's just a matter of basically forwarding that to DCFS and saying, hey, yeah, look, they're on the program. That may very well involve $3.5 million worth of administrative cost. But keep in mind, too, another $3.5 was put up by USDA. It wasn't like the state would have been shouldering the entire load. And, I think there are upwards of like a dozen other states with Republican leaders who've said, you know what, this is working for us. We're feeding kids. We're going to be on board with this program.
So the money that Louisiana has refused, that could now go to these other states to maybe bolster their program? Is that how that works?
The USDA hasn't really said that, okay, that means more money for other states, but clearly it's not an option. One of the things we explored was whether or not there would be an opportunity for, say, the city of New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, a parish government to step in and say, hey, look, we could use the money. Can we just bypass DCFS? The federal government said, no, it's just not set up that way. You have to go through a centralized provider. In this case, it would have been the state.
So the February 15th deadline to change your mind obviously has passed. Is there any other way to perhaps seek a reversal?
I don't know that there's one yet. We've seen in Nebraska, for instance, there was a law that was making its way through the legislature that ultimately got the governor, Scott Pillen, a Republican, to change his mind and accept the assistance after initially turning it down. But that was pre-February 15th. Now that the deadline's passed, I don't know. I guess there's always next year.
And the legislature couldn't have anything to say about this?
I have not heard from lawmakers. Okay. They've been opposed to the governor's decision, but I don't think anyone, as of yet, has put forward a legislation that would say, hey, let's join this on board. Of course, it would have to go past the governor's desk.
Right, exactly. All right, Greg, thanks a lot. E, over to you. We've had a great carnival, it seems.
Yeah, well, overall Carnival was a big success, but nevertheless leaves us with things to talk about. We want to start off with a clip at the actually at the Rex Ball Tuesday night interview. The police chief, Ann Kirkpatrick, and she's from Memphis, and so has had a little bit of experience with carnivals in Memphis. she was asked about how it compares with New Orleans, but the bigger picture was New Orleans' reputation in terms of crowd control. I think it's a very impressive answer. So.
All right, let's listen to Ann Kirkpatrick.
Well, you know, I grew up in Memphis, and although they have a carnival, there is nothing like New Orleans. New Orleans is a special city. And although Memphis is southern, there's just no comparison at all with the kindness and the welcoming of New Orleans. I've had a real wonderful experience, so thank you.
Well, you know, the New Orleans police, I'm sure as you know, is just like experts at big events at staging. I mean, what are people you call for advice on big events?
Actually, New Orleans has a global reputation for crowd control and conducting major events. Within a one-year time period, New Orleans experiences between 8 and 12 million visitors. That's like having every resident of New York City come to New Orleans when you put it in perspective. And Mardi Gras alone has about 1 million. That's like having all of San Francisco come.
Yeah, right.
And so they are actual globally recognized for their abilities.
Yes, indeed, the NOPD is known for its crowd control.
Sure, yeah. The city today released a statement about Carnival, declaring it to be a big success, and they were talking about security, and they mentioned that the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness has this kind of system that they use where they rate potential events in terms of the needs. This was rated at the level 2, which is pretty high up there, but it makes a difference in terms of the amount of resources that you have and emergency help and all that. And so it had almost the maximum of help. But with that, it all worked out well, but it was good to know that there was a good plan in the background. And so I think that was all very, very impressive. There were the usual shootings and things, but not more than you probably have in a typical weekend in New Orleans, and there wasn't any major disaster. Some of the issues that came up, and the city announced this week that it's going to form like a committee, which is kind of like a more tie-in with the council and with the Mardi Gras establishment to deal with some of the issues that they have. One of them is evaluating the parades. There's no system for evaluating parades. It's always been kind of, left to the marketplace. But there are some parades that there are questions about, and so maybe the city's going to have an apparatus to tell a crew, you can't parade anymore, and so that's going to happen.
Because of the lack of riders or bands or whatever? Is that the issue?
That. Well, a crew that had a lot of issues with the crew of Knicks, and it's gotten so much of a bad reputation over the past few years that it didn't have much of an attendance. There's also some problems on the West Bank, too, in Jefferson Parish. I think there were 2 crews that announced that they couldn't parade, and then they said, well, we couldn't parade because we didn't get our dues collected. I mean, could you imagine Rex or Zulu saying, well, we can't parade because we have to get a Zulu parade? I mean, that to me is an administrative problem that I think the council is going to have to deal with. And that's the kind of thing that goes out nationally. Mm-hmm. Well, 2 parades had to drop out of the New Orleans Mardi Gras today. Okay? And so that kind of thing. So there are some things that government needs to be doing. What proved to be a big issue was parades running late. Early in the parade season, you had a problem. I think the crew of Cleopatra, and it was a tree limb that stopped it. And that happened a couple of times, and you'd think by now there wouldn't be that problem anymore.
They run the streets before the parades.
Remember they said these trucks with these big
low-technology answer is there.
So,
they still do it.
You think they wouldn't have that problem. And somebody says, well, maybe they have new drivers who didn't know when they're supposed to go the right. And in fact, the Rex Parade also, but also on Mardi Gras, there was a big delay in the Zulu Parade. There's no definite answer, but one thing that people have been talking about, and I guess it's part of Zulu's success, is that it draws huge crowds like around Jackson Avenue. And this issue's been around here before. This is not the first time it's happened, that they say that the crowds were so big that it was hard for the floats to maneuver. Some people say, well, maybe they just need more control there. But it delayed Rex by a long time, and kind of an emotional thing is the big thing in the Rex Parade is that they always have this tradition where the Queen is toasted by Rex at the Intercontinental Hotel. Right. Well, the Queen and the court had to leave before the parade got there, and that was just kind of very disappointing to them. But think behind, and Rex builds an all-new parade. I mean, their thing's original. It's a beautiful parade, and a lot of people, I'm afraid, didn't get to see it. But think of all the trucks that go behind that. Okay, I guess something like 200 trucks, and so just think of all those things being delayed. And it's not like there's any rancor between Zulu and Rex. They get along well. The administrators of both crews knew each other, and they work. But there is a problem that needs to be fixed, and maybe this new council committee can help with that.
And also another issue is people, marking off their spot in the neutral ground or just, on the parade route. There's some problems with that,
Yeah,
too.
people go out a few hours early in the morning. I can tell you because I live along the Endymion route. It's not as bad as it was because in the past, like by Wednesday, okay, people had built a village on the neutral grounds, and there wasn't much of that. But there are people who just kind of rope off spots, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is. They do along left-hand trails. I guess the only thing is they have the policemen just say, don't do that anymore.
Yeah, if you were to judge by social media, it seemed like St. Charles Avenue was the hot spot this year with ladders, with platforms, with tents, and yeah, I don't know how you tackle that other than if you have a 24/7 policing presence, at which time you're going to have people say, well, is that the best use of our law enforcement?
Well, and then when you have the officers coming
ground?
through swiping ladders and tarps,
Yeah,
and then
it's a bad look.
It's a bad look, and it causes some potential issues for
I don't
those
envy
police
the city
officers
council.
doing their jobs.
The city council has some hard decisions to make.
But also along St. Charles Avenue, you have a big university population of students. I think you have a lot of students having parties out there and that kind of thing. And to me, it's kind of a happy sight, but it's also is blocking opportunities for people.
It's not. It's gotten a little bit out of control, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's
the
just
city.
it's so over the top.
24 hours ahead to be sitting in your chair.
Yeah.
Well, it's a line now with those canopies.
Night,
The aerial
it's so
shot,
good.
you can just see a line of canopies now.
Yeah,
on
it's
the
just
neutral ground.
everything.
There
It's a
are
lot.
local families that will pay college students to camp in their spot. So let's not put this all on the college kids.
Right. Well, the city did say that they were going to really crack down on this.
And
You
they
couldn't
did.
set up before 4
Yeah.
hours, before a parade. So, but it is an issue too.
But the thing about the parade delays, I think, is a really serious issue because you have things where you may have float riders just standing there for an hour or so, and that can be potentially dangerous. And it's especially a huge burden on Zulu. Well, we don't know whose fault it is, but the thing is, they are the first parade on the most important day of the carnival season. And so any delay related to them or not just has this trickle-down effect that goes all the way down. So.
All righty, E. But it was overall a good.
Overall,
carnival.
it was a good- it was a
Weather
good
was
thing.
good. Crowds
Yeah.
were good.
Yeah.
All righty. Okay, Dawn, over to you. Soccer is a growing sport.
It sure is. And while some of you were parading on Fat Tuesday, some of us were cheering on our children in the state soccer playoffs as far away as Shreveport. Because, yes, indeed, the LHSAA does not pay attention to the carnival calendar when they schedule state playoffs.
So you were in Shreveport?
I was in Shreveport for Mardi Gras, but the Ben Franklin girls won, and they won big, so that was a lot of fun. Soccer was not recognized as a sport by the LHSAA until 1987. Prior to that, you had different club leagues that people could participate in, the NOLA Interscholastic Soccer Association or the Louisiana Interscholastic Soccer Association, but it was not a varsity sport recognized by the state until 1987. So it really is a whole new generation of soccer players, and it has grown exponentially. There are now 4 different divisions, 1, 2, 3, and 4, girls and boys, and there are more than 45 teams in each of those divisions competing for their chance to be one of the 32 teams that makes it to those playoffs. We're now in the semifinal round. Some of the teams started playing yesterday. That goes through this weekend, and there are 13 of the 32 teams in that semifinal round are from the New Orleans greater metro area. North Shore, South Shore, Ben Franklin, both boys and girls teams, Newman, both boys and girls teams, Jesuit, Mount Carmel is huge in it, SSA. So it really has grown as a large sport. And within the last 3 years, New Orleans soccer clubs, which are clubs in addition to your high school team, have been able to elevate to be at showcases with college coaches that clubs around the nation were at before. So we're finally getting the looks, I'm told, that soccer players from around the nation have been seeing for years. And of the 13 girls who are high school seniors this year who participate in like the Baton Rouge Soccer Club, Louisiana Fire, those type of clubs, all 13 girls are going to go play soccer in college. So it's a big sport, and it is growing. And it's growing in, it's the biggest sport in the world. It just isn't so much in our country. And FIFA, the World Cup games are in North America in 2026. So it will continue to grow exponentially. In 2026, the games are divided between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. The closest cities to here that are hosting games are Dallas and Houston. Dallas will be hosting 11 of those games. So there's an opportunity to see soccer at a really, really, really big level very soon. In addition to that, last year the United States Soccer Association announced $3 million in Innovate to Grow grants spread around the nation. Some of that money actually came to New Orleans, and it's being used by the New Orleans Jesters combined with NORD to really introduce soccer at a no cost or low barrier to cost to kids here. And it started this week with camps at Annunciation Playground that will continue to grow. So it's growing, and our kids are actually learning and doing well. And as long as they are getting the exposure they need, they're going on to play beyond their playground and high school years and play for colleges and play semi-professionally.
As a mother, do you prefer have a son playing soccer?
I have a daughter playing soccer.
Oh, okay. What's the other son?
I have a son who plays football, unfortunately.
Well, that would be my question.
I also, same son, actually both my sons play lacrosse, which looks to be like the next sport that will go the way of soccer. Right now it's not recognized by the LHSAA. The schools that have teams are playing at the club level, not at the varsity level, and they have to travel all over to play, but they're starting to be recognized and get college scholarships too. So it's the newest growing sport. Soccer's there now, and lacrosse will come up next.
And
I would prefer soccer over football, to answer
your
question.
Real quick, your daughter's team is advanced?
They are playing in the state semifinals tomorrow.
All right.
Yay, good luck.
Good luck
in
to all.
Homa,
Best of
so
luck.
go
All right.
Falcons.
Very good. All right, guys, other stories. E, over to you.
Well, if you're suffering from post-Mardi Gras letdown, realize a month from this weekend is the weekend of St. Patrick's Day and St. Joseph's Day and more parades.
So more parades are coming.
So we have the post-Mardi Gras, mini Mardi Gras coming up within a month.
All right. Stephanie.
We've talked about the housing market and some of the pressure points they're feeling there, and we're taking a look at how this is impacting first-time home buyers who are particularly impacted, having a hard time getting into the market, finding something affordable with the interest rates and insurance rates.
All right. Over to you, Don.
We didn't talk about the Division I soccer teams, but the 4 playing in the Final Four are Mount Carmel, SSA on the girls' side, and Jesuit and St. Paul's on the boys' side. So they are all New Orleans area teams playing.
Okay.
Very cool.
Good luck to them all. Greg.
A 3-week special session devoted to crime starts Monday. The big sexy headline grabber is going to be the push for expanded death penalty. What people really need to pay attention to is that a lot of what's being proposed is going to result in larger prison populations, those people in prison staying there longer. There's a cost involved with that could very well fall to the taxpayer.
Okay, so that begins Monday, the special. And how long does that special
3-week session?
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys, so much for being around our table. And thank you all for joining us, too. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Public television is our passion. With so much content that WYES broadcasts and presents online, we are quite entertained and highly informed.
Please join us in supporting WYES.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.